Mary Embleton is with King Conservation District, and she's the senior manager for the Regional Food System Program and manages a very large portfolio of food system grants within King County. And I'm really excited to hear about her, her work there. She's going to talk to us today about building successful partnerships to expand farmland access and improve farm business viability. And Mary, if you, while we're waiting for this, if you'd like to just expand a little bit on the work that you do there, feel free.
Absolutely. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. This is different than a Zoom meeting, which I've been on millions of those.
I know, right?
Yes, so I joined the Conservation District in October of 2015, so I'm approaching my 6th year there. I manage a portfolio of about, the biggest part of the program is the grant funding that we provide. It's about $900,000 a year. We currently fund about $300,000 of that as a competitive grant process. That's basically everybody comes to us with their great ideas, and it goes through a review and a ranking by an external review panel, and then those are awarded. We're heading into, if everybody wants to keep this in mind, we should be issuing an RFP for this year's grant round sometime in probably towards the end of the month. Okay.
So Mary, I do have the screen going here. I'm hoping that you can see that just fine, and you just give me the go ahead and I'm happy to advance.
Absolutely. So the other part of that $900,000 pool goes to strategic initiatives. And the way we identify strategic initiatives is we have a very large stakeholder group of basically everybody along the supply chain of food systems, not only in King County, but throughout the region and the state. And those are targeted, and today we're kind of focusing on farmland access, but there's also a strategic initiative we have out right now that's funding farm business support and technical assistance services. That's through Business Impact Northwest. And if you are a producer in King County, the services that they provide, whether it's marketing support, funding education, access to funding, business planning, all that kind of suite of services and one-on-one technical assistance, those will be free to King County producers or at a very reduced cost. So that's kind of the portfolio itself. Consists of a lot of things that impact the food system all along the supply chain, from production, access to land, barriers for entry, and that's all the business planning and financial access, things like that. Lots of infrastructure projects. Of course, a lot of people need irrigation or greenhouses, tractors, implements, things like that. Food access has been really successful in terms of funding FreshBucks and SNAP-Ed, as well as working with a number of food banks. One of the exciting projects we have right now is funding Harvest Against Hunger, which was previously Rotary First Harvest, and they're contracting directly with producers in King County and aggregating product and then getting it into their supply chain that delivers to various food banks, food pantries, and emergency food feeding programs. So that's been wonderful, but just a really wide variety of projects. Today I'm going to focus on one is, like, you know, we typically think of land access. It's one of the most significant barriers. So we can go to the next slide. That's just the title. You heard that. We can go to the next one. So local fresh food is a priority in our region. It has been for some time. I've worked in the area of sustainable food systems for about 30 years. It's been a real learning curve for a lot of folks in terms of what's available, when it's available, what to do with it. I mean, I think Diane gave a really great presentation. This is like, if you get a squash, what do you do with it? COVID-19, I mean, you know, everybody's been slammed for about a year and a half now with you know, limited access, and a lot of farmers lost their markets. They had to pivot, consumers had to pivot, you know, change their marketing practices, find new market opportunities. But the thing that we realized is that having those local farmers and having local food, it makes our economy more resilient. So those really long supply chains we see have been broken during the pandemic. And the cyber attack on JBS, which is actually a Brazilian-owned company, but still, there are these larger things that can have just significant impacts on food and food access. And so making sure that we have a reliable source of local food means having a reliable source of local farmers. In order to farm, we have to have land. And land access is a significant barrier in many of our counties throughout the state because of competing land uses and high land values. And so I think over the years, particularly the last several years with the district, we've seen some really incredible partnerships emerge of places to work and find organizations that support your efforts that aren't necessarily the traditional buy lease arrangement that a lot of people think of when they think of farmland access. So we can go to the next slide. So we're going to look at just a variety of different partners, and counties certainly have land in their portfolios. Many counties in the state do have farmland preservation programs. That's always a great place to start if you can work with your county. They might not have a designated program. They might have the land, and you can work with whether it's their planning department or whomever controls the property. This piece of property that we're looking at right now is the Sammamish Valley Farm, and again, it's owned by King County and through their farmland preservation program. It's a large parcel, and currently right now, the partners are the Black Farmers Collective, and that's a group of BIPOC farmers that are farming this site. There's also Hmong Mien producers there as well, and the nice part about this is the access to land piece, but also there's access to infrastructure that helps reduce the costs of production and actually helps them get more product to market. And so on this site in particular, irrigation is really critically important. They've got a grant with us right now to bring potable water into the site so that they can actually develop a wash pack station using potable water. And so that's the Woodinville Water District will be extending a line to this site so that farmers will have that potable water. Next slide. So this is this year's tilling. It's ready to plant. It's actually being planted now, but you can see it's quite an expansive plot, which is a great opportunity. I think there's 15 farmers farming on this site right now. Okay, next slide. This is another county-owned property, same through the Farmland Preservation Program. I had to cut this off in order to get it to fit into the screen, but it's actually called the horse neck property. So this is the neck piece, and if you looked up here, there's actually a head of a horse, and it's a hilariously named property, but the Green River is there. And this site is in Kent. I'm gonna scroll here. I've got to look at my notes so that I have it available. So this is actually a quite extensive partnership with the county. There is a project, it's called FACT, which is the Food Access and Aggregation Community Team. It consists of Highline College, International Rescue Committee, and the Food Innovation Network. So all of those programs serve different immigrant refugee communities, BIPOC communities, as well as other farmers and community members. And this site is just getting underway now. It's transitioning. They just established a 5-year lease, and they will be installing irrigation here, as well as a wash pack station and some on-site storage. The typically underserved communities, one is, and a lot of these programs share similar characteristics in terms of who the partners are. And so that's also something to think about if you're looking at land access in your community, is what organizations are there. There's typically an organization that's working on hunger, food access, production agriculture. It could be farm to school, farm to institution, anywhere that's, trying to kind of build those networks to support whatever local production is there. This FACT group is pretty amazing. One of the groups that they're working with is a group of East African farmers, Wakalima USA. And Wakalima's at a couple of other sites as well, and Finn and IRC and Highline are really integral part of the network that's helping support these and other typically underserved communities, access land and infrastructure and markets and things like that. So they're really exciting, and it's fun to be part of these relationships. And that's where you do build trust, is like having successful programs, and just, being there for folks when they call to have you a question or they call to pick your brain. And some days I joke that I don't have anything left to pick, but somewhere it just keeps going up there. So anyways, next slide, please. And this is their plowing this year. And you can see it's COVID, so they've all got masks on, and that's storage containers are great. Sometimes you can get them for about $2,000, and they're great resources to have, secure storage for tools and implements and things like that. Okay, next slide. Okay, cities as landowners, and in this case, this little piece we're looking at is the city of Des Moines, and this is Mary Gay Park, and this is a partnership between Highline College and the city. And Wakalima farmers are also here. You can see their little sign there, and they've got the raised beds, and they've got some on-site greenhouses and some irrigation that they're able to access. Highline College also has another relationship with another city park, Sanju Park. A lot of times smaller communities, so Des Moines, it's a great little community, but they don't necessarily have the financial resources to take care of these. And a lot of these parcels, the parks, were pretty much overgrown with like Himalayan blackberry and knotweed and other invasive things. And so I think one of the things, there are trade-offs in some of these partnerships, is there's a lot of sweat equity that goes into clearing and maintaining some of these sites. But and the city appreciates it because they can't afford to do it, and then they become really good, good network support and good neighbors. So next slide. This is Mara Farm, and it's located in South Park in Seattle. This is owned by the city of Seattle through their Department of Neighborhoods. And you might have heard of the Pea Patch program. It was one of the earliest, but it's a community gardening. It's a network of community gardening sites. This is one of them. However, the nice thing about Mara Farm, it's been there for a long time, an established farm in the city, just like Picardo Farm was. They were market farmers at Pike Place Market. But this is Salsa de la Vida. This is a Latinx women-owned farm cooperative, and they farm one of the larger sites at Mara Farm. And they have a heated greenhouse and some other infrastructure as well too. So again, making those, resources available to a broader group of farmers and sharing really helps reduce some of those barriers in terms of accessing, once you've got the land, it's just accessing the tools, equipment, and other infrastructure that you need to be successful. Next slide. Churches as landowners. And I realized when I was looking at this morning to make sure that my notes were correct, I actually put a couple of other slides, so we'll have to advance after this picture and then we'll hop back again. So this is the Kent Community Garden, of course, located in Kent. It's actually owned by St. Columba's Episcopal Church. This is also another very large collaborative. There's another, let's see, to the left, I guess, of the church itself behind the chain link fence. There's a long strip of property that was heavily wooded and also really just overgrown with invasive species. Again, the blackberry and the knotweed, and just, snags and brushes. So that was also part of the sweat equity. But Forterra led this project of developing the garden site along with the International Rescue Committee through their New Roots program, and Highline College, again, global to local. And then I think the other thing is, again, is looking at these broad networks of folks that you might not think would participate, but there was an architecture firm that volunteered their time to basically do the design of the farm itself, do some charrettes with the community to find out, what they wanted, what type of plots they wanted, what would work for them in terms of, getting to the site and having access and things like that. They got donations from the Fruit Tree Society. Plumbers Without Borders has actually participated in several of the projects that I've been involved in, and corporate volunteers, Starbucks, lumber companies donate lumber sometimes. I mean, so it's just like there's a network of folks to look, to see how they might want to participate Jewish Community Services was also involved in this project. So it's there's a lot to think about in terms of the possibilities of building these really, successful partnerships. So you're going to have to skip a couple of slides down. I'll tell you when to stop. Keep going. Keep going. Keep going. I think it's 2 more. Next. Next. Next slide. There we go. So this is the area that was outside the fence that's been all cleared. They also got some clearing from a construction company that came with a backhoe and helped scrape off the vegetation that they couldn't get under control. And it's been, the paths are laid out, the plots are laid out like the community wanted. And again, a lot of immigrant, refugee, and traditionally underserved community members participate in this project. So this is their beds, and crops are growing. This was last year. And then you can go to the next slide. And here's happy people participating in their garden. They raise a lot for themselves, and some sell it. There's a nice farmers market in Kent. There's actually a couple farmers markets in Kent where they can sell their produce as well. Okay, now back to that after the first slide. There we go. So this is another really interesting project. This is the Living Well Kent Greenhouse and Farm. It's located in Auburn. The landowner is the Seventh-day Adventist Church. So this is a 8-bay greenhouse that they lease from the church. It is about 22,000 square feet of growing area. They work also with Northwest Harvest, and Northwest Harvest supports them by paying utilities and lease and water. And in exchange, they get fresh produce for their food bank system to be distributed throughout the region, which is great. They've also partnered with Mother Africa in terms of providing some composting facilities, and they have a lot of volunteers and community members. There's been several different farmers here. Some have, this is the nice thing about some of these, they serve as like kind of great foundations for farmers, especially immigrant and refugee farmers that need to learn about production in the Northwest, different growing styles. We work with them and others work with them to get, appropriate seeds for, culturally appropriate products that they're used to having that will grow in our climate. And then, once they get here and get established, start to sell, then several of them have moved on to have their own farms in other areas. And that's the same for all the other different land ownership relationships, is that they're good incubators, whether they're technically an incubator or not. So this is great. They've made a lot of improvements to the greenhouse. They've added irrigation. They've added secure storage on site so that a lot of folks don't have cars and then need public transportation to get here. So, bringing your tools is not really necessarily something that you're capable of on the bus. So they have secure storage now and things like that. So that's a really nice project. They also have, and go to the next slide. So they also have, the churches allowed them to have an acre. I think there's up to 5 acres that they can farm. And so this is one of the acres, and these are crops being brought in, zucchini. So it's good to see the people actually engaged in these activities and see what it starts out looking like, and after all the effort to see, what they actually can grow, and that's pretty enlightening. Next slide. All right, this is another church. Churches present great opportunities because there are a lot of churches in the state of Washington, and a lot of them have really big parking lots. And this is Hillside Church, and they're the owners of the property. And this was actually a DPAVE project. And the World Relief Seattle is a nonprofit that is kind of the leader of this program at Hillside Church. They have community partnerships as well as a lot of these other projects, tons of volunteers Corporate volunteers, Plumbers Without Borders also helped here, and we can talk about the cisterns and the on-site irrigation that they helped with. Lowe's donated a bunch of implements and tools and supplies for the garden. They've got a greenhouse, they've got storage. And the other thing is, one of the really exciting projects that we're working on now with them that they've got funding for is actually the church had a small commercial kitchen, and what they're going to do is basically outfit that with like 10 bays that are all each stations, where folks that are farming on the site can bring in their product and do value added and things like that. So again, providing additional market opportunities and to help. And Wakalima is here as well. These are a lot of these South End projects are great because a lot of people don't have, it's got good bus transportation. A lot of people don't necessarily have transportation, or they have daytime jobs where they can only get there, you know, certain times. So it's really a good situation to help folks. So next slide. Here's the cisterns that were put in. You can see why it's called Hillside. Next slide. And these are the raised beds. So once they got all the paving removed, they couldn't really plant in the soil. So they brought in, I think this was when GrowCo, so King County has a system through the wastewater utility, the waste treatment plant that do GrowCo, which is a compost. And so they got that donated, and I was trying to find a really good picture where everything was growing, but this is the one I had. So you can see where it started out, but it's, I think they've gotten fruit trees donated as well. And again, the commercial kitchen is the next thing in line. And so that should be completed at the end of the year. Next slide. Okay, these were the two we saw. Okay, so now port districts. A lot of people don't necessarily think about port districts as partners, but I mean, two of their primary goals are economic development and workforce development. So this is Port of Skagit owns this property. This is Viva Farms. Viva Farms, Snohomish County, located in Mount Vernon. And this is actually a farm incubator. So there are students there that go through a practicum in sustainable agriculture. They share equipment, business planning, marketing, all those things that you need to actually, you know, get going and establish a farming business. Once they go through that, they can then transition on to some of the additional acreage at the site. So from smaller plots to bigger plots. This is primarily Latino farmers. And so that you can see some of the shared infrastructure on here. They've got cold storage, wash pack, greenhouses, irrigation, and the port's been a really committed partner to this project. And many of the farmers that have started here and gone through, not all of them have transitioned off, but several have now and have their own farms in the community off-site. So that's exciting. Another thing to say about Viva Farms, I don't have a slide for this one, but there are also philanthropists and foundations that own land that are interested in food access and therefore in food production. And so Viva Farms has another farm in Woodinville in the Sammamish Valley. And it's part of, they have the same thing. So they have the student program, and then they have other farmers there as well. This is the same in both places, but that's just a different ownership model, but similar the way that Viva is set up in terms of having the practicum and the education, and then there's larger pieces that they can lease out. All right, next slide. Oh, next slide. Private landowners. So there are a lot of private landowners that are very interested. No, you can go to the next slide. That are interested in they have farmland and they're interested in preserving farmland, but they may not be interested in farming it themselves. And so the next couple of projects are basically kind of the second stage incubators where folks went through an initial incubator project and then just needed kind of one step up in order to really establish their farms and their markets and the different ways that they were going to, you know, identify their customers. This is Cart Before Horse Farm. Both of these kind of second incubator phases are on the Enumclaw Plateau. And Julie owns this property with her husband. And she's been a farmland preservation advocate for a long time, also engaged with Washington Farmland Trust in parcels in Pierce County, where the trust purchased the development rights and then sold them back. And they continue to do that as well. And so they were able to sell that piece in Pierce to another couple. And then they found this piece, which they're renovating. It's an old horse farm. And this was a pasture under serious need of rehabilitation to go from horses to production agriculture. So next slide. So this is after disking and liming, and it's a pretty great field now. It's pretty lush and vibrant. You can see all the outbuildings. Some of these are being converted. There's now cold storage. Their farm partner right now, and we'll be adding others, is Hell or High Water Farm. Okay, next slide. This is shared soil, also on the Enumclaw Plateau. This is owned by Lily, and Lily has her own farm there called Lily's Farm, but it's also that kind of next stage incubator where the other two farms on site are Twinkle Toes Farm and Faith Before Farm. And again, through a grant with us, they got to put in irrigation, wash pack station, pump house, cold storage, lots of other things. I can't think of everything, greenhouse. So it's great. So, you know, they're able to have all the folks on site. And again, like I said, some of these opportunities are stepping stones as farms get more experience. So Faith Before Farm has graduated from this stage, and they now have their own farm up in Skagit County. Okay, next slide. This is the wash pack station. That's Lily. And I think that's Mabin, but I can't remember. But they're happy. Okay, next. Utilities as landowners. So this is kind of a unique opportunity in terms of a lot of people don't think of utility rights of ways necessarily for agriculture. But again, like some of these, while they're kind of unique opportunities, are kind of outside the box of thinking about just, you know, leasing or owning private land. They come with some challenges in terms of, you know, just in the things that you have to agree to or, you know, not agree to, like you can't have livestock on this site. I don't know that you'd want to have them that close to I-5 is, you know, right there. Smith Tower, you can see. But this is a great farm. So this is Yes Farm, and it's on the WashDOT right of way. And Yesler Terrace is a housing development that's right adjacent to this site where there's both elderly and youth, and they participate in the garden as well as the Black Farmers Collective, which is a cooperative of farmers that are also growing here for market. And then, so the community is able to garden here as well. So next slide. So this is Elk Run Farm. It's in Maple Valley. This is Elk Run Farm, used to be Elk Run Golf Course. And the utility, you can see that's Bonneville Power Administration, so they own the property. Some of the challenges here is that you can't have farm equipment. I mean, you can have rototillers, but you can't have tractors. You got to do everything to kind of stay under the power lines. And so everything also has to be mobile in case Bonneville ever needs to get in there and service the power as part of their utility maintenance. That's the old, that's actually an old restaurant there that's being converted to other uses. This is really fun. Elk Run so it's owned by Bonneville Power Administration. Elk Run Farm is a project of the South King County Food Coalition, and the coalition is a network of about 21 food banks in kind of south and southeast King County. And so the food that's produced here is distributed to those food banks as well as others. A lot of these projects, you can go to the next slide. So this is some of the raised beds that they've put in. You can see that the houses are right adjacent to it. I've been here several times. The neighbors love the fact that the farm is here. There's an adjacent high school, so this is another partnership. Highline College, again, is a partner here. Bobby Butler runs the Sustainable Ag program. He's an amazing person. If you can find one of those people in your community, he knows a little bit of everything and is always willing to help. So it's been a great learning opportunity for me and sharing with all these folks in terms of the knowledge and just the perseverance. Actually, I think is a pretty good word, because sometimes there's some pretty big barriers even with these other opportunities that you might not consider. But it has been great. The high school students come, they volunteer. They also get classroom credit through their science curriculum, and so they help out on the farm. There's lots of youth volunteers that come and help harvest, and they've got, you know, help with site preparation, and so it's all around a good thing. The food banks get a lot of fresh product. They just got a new cold storage unit, and that's pretty exciting. So that's my last slide. I had to kind of draw the line at where all the, I could put 1,006 pictures in here because they're great, and it's especially it's good to see the people, and I should have ended with a people one. But there's some other opportunities that didn't make it into this slide, and we've got plenty of time. Land trusts and farmland trusts. Not all land trusts are farmland trusts. A lot of land trusts deal with protecting environmentally sensitive areas or environmentally critical areas, wildlife habitat, shorelines, forests, things like that. But some are very interested in preserving farmland as part of the working landscape and as part of our communities. And Forterra has been involved in that. PCC Farmland Trust, which is now Washington Farmland Trust, has been an active participant. There's a whole working farmland partnership team that is looking at, you know, identifying farmable but unfarmed land, and, you know, basically doing kind of a triage in terms of taking people that want to get into farming and basically working one-on-one with landowners that are willing and able to partner to do that. So that's, you know, there's lots of really neat things that come out of these different relationships, and it's good to be in a position where, you know, kind of to know or keep learning about what's going on in different communities, to share that information with others, so that, you know, they're, you know, especially when you're at the initial stages of starting some of these projects, you know, you don't know exactly where to start or who to talk to, or and it's really easy to get inundated with information. And so it helps having folks like conservation districts and others like Extension, you know, where these networks of kind of boots on the ground folks are, to kind of help others navigate these issues and direct them to the resources that they need. Vashon Land Trust on Vashon Island has the Matsuda Farm, which has a really interesting history. They're carrying on a tradition. It used to be owned by Japanese farmers, the Matsuda family. They were interred during the war, and eventually were unable to maintain the farm. The trust has the farm now. It used to be all pasture. They've converted a portion of it to production agriculture. KCD was fortunate to be able to support them in that effort in terms of building high tunnels and irrigation and fencing, and the habitat part of KCD was able to, you know, control purple loosestrife and do additional plantings. They have an irrigation pond on site, and so it's been really a collaborative effort with them and with KCD and our resources and technical assistance to get it off the ground. They're now growing food for the Vashon School District and the food bank, and they've just got another little grant to have like a value-added kitchen, so that they'll be able to process stuff. And similar to what Diane was talking about, going to the food bank, but this case it will also be going to the schools. So that's, and you can go to my last slide, and I'll just echo what Diane said, is that I'm always available, you know, well, maybe not always available, but I can make time available, you know, if people have questions, or, you know, have questions about maybe in their community who they might want to reach out to if they're interested in getting any kind of projects like this established. So that's it for my presentation, and I'd be happy to take questions.
That was wonderful. Thank you, Mary.
Thank you for helping me out.
Absolutely. We both were helping each other out. So as a reminder for everyone, this is a great opportunity to type in your question in the questions box. I did notice that a couple questions kind of that came in at the end of Diane's presentation. I saw Stephanie kind of address those. Another thought too is, since we do have some time before we're supposed to end, if for some reason you have a question and it doesn't get answered during this time, obviously reach out to our presenters, or you can put it in the chat box, and we can see about them answering it by reaching out to them as well. So Stephanie, if you want to come on here as well, I have a question actually. I was wondering, Mary, just to kind of grease the wheels for folks to type in their questions, was, you know, does King CD have, like, as part of its annual plan of work, a focus area, if you will? There's such variety of these different programs that King is involved in. And as a small district here on Whidbey, I was curious to know, like, how is it that you define the CD's role in each of these different endeavors? Does that change with the need, or is it pretty clear, like, your role is X and you apply that across the board to these different programs that you participate in?
So the programs that I've talked about today all fall under, well, not all of them, most of them fall under the regional food program. And so we do have rates and charges at KCD. So we have we're in a different situation than a lot of other districts. We have a lot of programs. So we have urban and rural agriculture, we have urban and rural forestry, we have shorelines, education and outreach, all those different things. Mm-hmm. And they all have their own work plan. And so we have an interlocal agreement with King County. So we do those in 5-year chunks. And so our 5-year chunk is like we just revisited last year for the next 5 years. In terms of like the buckets of the topic areas where we decide to fund things, those are all based on stakeholder outreach. And so right now it's just like farmland access, institutional purchasing, business support. We will be doing a dairy initiative here. Okay. And those things. And so it's probably time to revisit those buckets again to see if we're really hitting what people's most urgent needs are. I mean, we're slow to respond, but we did respond to COVID through a number of our different programs, and through regional food, we actually extended funding for Harvest Against Hunger for their direct contracting with producers and the food access piece of what they do. So
great, thank you. A few questions have come in. One was, what was the name of the Japanese American farm you talked about at the end?
Matsuda.
Matsuda.
M-A-T-S-U-D-A.
Thank you. Also, great, they said, amazing presentation, Mary. So kudos to you. The question is, I see a lot of those parcels are located in public spaces. How are the organizations protecting those spaces from vandalization, theft, and other issues?
Typically, the most common thing that I've seen is, well, like for example, at the greenhouse, they installed cameras. They installed a security system. Theft at farms across, whether it's private property or not, it's happening everywhere. And it's really picked up in the last couple of years during the pandemic, which is really unfortunate. But, that's where networks help too, is like, you get on one of our listservs and it's like somebody's tractor got stolen. So it's hard to stop everything, but a lot of on the smaller parcels in particular, the storage containers, which are fairly affordable with, locks that you can't cut and things like that. And if you can get motion cameras or, anything, people are trying to get innovative, but, if people are really determined to get something, they usually will. But it hasn't been a huge deal.
Yeah.
It's more on privately owned property that I've seen that are just, single owner operators where things have gotten stolen.
Interesting. I was curious with some of those publicly owned properties you had mentioned a little bit with the WSDOT right of way is, the language or the making sure you guys have agreements. How does that work?
Well, it's different for each organization. It's different for churches, or it's different from utility rights of way. And so Bonneville Power basically has they have an agreement with South King County Food Coalition to operate that site. And so the things is it's like they've been really good about, the driving range is being converted to the wash, pack, and storage, and the the restaurant there is like aggregation and, you know, boxing up, you know, so they're a very willing partner. It's just like, because you're in a utility right of way, you know, they have things that, you know, you're under a power line. So it's just like, you know, those are things, but it's just like, in, you know, no livestock. And it's just like, there's things like that, but yeah.
I'd be curious to know, because of that status of being like a public utility, are there certain encounters you've had with county zoning and such like that that you've had to navigate with that, or is that completely exempt from this situation?
Not that I know of. I mean, county regulate, so I'm not going to try to generalize too much across here. So if you're on a parcel that's designated, so all the farmland preservation program parcels are in the farmland preservation program. So typically those are in ag production districts in King County. And so the rules and abilities and stuff, those are really well established, what's allowable use, et cetera. And the county has a real interest. They have since Dow Constantine became executive, that of food access and protecting working farmlands has been critical, and now expanding access to immigrant, refugee, and, you know, other traditionally underserved farmers is their priority. And so, you know, they have a permit review team that goes through and, you know, tries to look at the rules that apply to agriculture. But then there's outside organizations where you might want to have farm paths, because a lot of the farmland in King County is in the floodplain or the floodway. And a lot of the other stuff that was good farmland is now industrial warehouses. So I just look at Kent and Auburn and things like that. And so, but those floodplains and those floodways are controlled by the Army Corps of Engineers or the Department of Ecology, and they determine whether or not it's okay if you have a farm path, because that's considered a fill in the floodway. So, and they change their minds. They don't always, you know. So I think each probably has some general characteristics that apply to all of them, and then there's very unique characteristics that apply to some.
Very helpful, thank you. Stephanie, have any hands been raised? Anybody's come through?
You know, I'm not seeing any.
You know, Mary, just touching on a comment that really hit me in Diane's presentation right before yours, and didn't get a chance to ask Diane, but I feel like of your experience too, maybe you have some wisdom to lend, which is she made the comment of making sure to show up and keep showing up when it comes to these audiences and serving them. You know, what advice would you give to small districts such as mine, for example, where of course the violin we all have of funding is always the capacity.
In time, because you have this job, and doing outreach to the community is part of your job, but it's also part of your passion as being a district employee, because we don't get in this because we want to sit behind the desk and, you know, not do site visits all the time. And so, and, you know, I would say across most district employees is that we want to be of service. That's kind of what our passion is, right? And so I'm going to show up as often and as much as I can. And I think the one thing that Diane ended with that I think is really important to underscore is legislation. So I sit on the Washington Food Policy Forum, and part of what we do, I mean, and so that's led by the State Conservation Commission, and a lot of different participants are at that table: food hunger, food access, production, climate change. It crosses the gamut. And we have made recommendations to the legislature. We have reports, we're working on things now, but through this legislative session has been really successful in getting fruit and veggie programs extended, getting some additional money for conservation districts to do food related programs. And so there's just been some really great advocates, and that's a part that maybe is least tasteful to some people to do, is to go to Olympia and have to, you know, meet and greet, and, you know, but it's just like farmers, you know, you might be a great farmer, but you're not a great marketer, or you're not a great bookkeeper. And so you have to find somebody that is. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, so if you don't like going to Olympia, and it's not my favorite thing, it's just like, It's like find somebody that is, and I just happen to know several people that really enjoy it. So it's just like awesome. I'm happy to give you my input. So, but legislation is important. County planning, you know, when those GMA plans get renewed, Growth Management Act, for folks that don't know what that acronym means. Typically there's a land use portion of it. And if you have, if you're agriculture in your county, there's usually some specifics that relate to food production and all those things. And there's other opportunities at different levels, rather than on the ground, it's in the state house, or it's in the county courthouse, or it's in the county planning department, or cities, jurisdictions have, rules against having chickens in your backyard. But, anybody that can produce their own food, it's awesome, whether it's a small scale or a large scale. And so there's other places to help with those issues that come up.
Yeah, I echo that myself too, even with our small district, serving directly with those folks at the planning department, being in tune with those GMA updates.
And I think the other thing is like Woodby's got these great resources. There's these great community advocates. You've got great organizations, awesome farmers market. I mean, it's just like, it's a unique community, but there's advocates there, and it's just like, they're doing a good job.
Yeah, definitely. I was just thinking about, the spectrum of conservation district staff who may be on the call, who might be thinking to themselves, how do I get into this, or how do I stay in this, and we got a kind of a final comment of, yeah, exactly. Showing up for the boring stuff is so important. So definitely kudos to you for showing up and for being here today and sharing your wealth of knowledge, Mary. We really appreciate that.
I just want to say thanks for having me. It's just like, I miss being at Sleeping Lady. It's just like, but they're open again. So I think if we want to go as individuals and not as a group of 400, we're probably allowed. But yeah.
Yeah, well, wonderful. Well, we're wrapping up a little early today, which I'm sure for everyone is just fine. But Mary's been kind enough to make herself available. If you have other questions, you can reach out to her at her contact she left in the presentation. And as a reminder to everybody, we will be reconvening tomorrow at 9 o'clock. We'll get started just a little earlier as organizers, but we'll look forward to seeing you at 9 o'clock. If you decide to stay on the stormwater track, because this is the stormwater and food systems track. Otherwise, we will hopefully see you soon. So we'll talk to you all later. Have a good rest of your afternoon.
Can I do a quick reminder that there's social hours starting at 3 o'clock, and the link is in your in the schedule. So hopefully some of you can join us for social hour at 3 o'clock in about 5 minutes.
Yeah, quick bathroom break and then social hour. All
Well,
right.
thank you so much.
Mary.
Thank you.
Take care, everybody.